Have you ever noticed how some people seem to move through life with money flowing toward them almost effortlessly, while others struggle endlessly, working harder, sacrificing more, yet never breaking free from financial pressure? It's not that they're lazy or unintelligent. It's not that they don't want success badly enough. And it's not that the universe favors a select few. There is something far more subtle, far more powerful, quietly shaping financial outcomes behind the scenes, something most people unknowingly activate every single day. And it all comes down to one word, a single word that, when spoken habitually, quietly sabotages wealth before it ever has a chance to reach you. If you want to understand why money seems to slip through your fingers no matter how hard you try, stay with me. Because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you speak, think, and live. Joseph Murphy spent decades studying the hidden laws that govern prosperity and the subconscious mind. He understood something most people never realize. Money does not respond to effort alone. It responds to consciousness. It responds to inner agreement. And that agreement is shaped, reinforced, and locked into place by language. Words are not innocent. They are not neutral. They are commands issued to the subconscious, and the subconscious executes them with absolute precision. You may believe you want to be rich, but if your words contradict that desire, your subconscious will always side with your words, not your wishes. Think about how often people speak about money without thinking. Conversations with friends, thoughts while checking bank accounts, casual remarks made throughout the day. Most people assume they're simply describing reality, but in truth, they are programming it. Every word carries an instruction, every phrase carries a direction, and one word in particular acts like a silent contract with limitation. A word so common, so socially accepted, that almost no one questions it. Yet the moment it leaves your mouth, it sends a powerful signal of restriction into your subconscious mind. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind does not argue. It does not reason. It does not evaluate truth or falsehood. It accepts what you say as fact and then reorganizes your behavior, perception, and opportunities to match that declaration. That is why two people in identical circumstances can experience completely different financial outcomes. One speaks from expansion, the other speaks from contraction, and the subconscious follows orders faithfully every time. We live in a universe governed by law, not chance. Just as gravity responds the same way every time, the laws of mind respond consistently. Murphy explained that your words are seeds. Once planted in the subconscious, they grow into experiences. Say the wrong word often enough, and you don't just describe poverty. You create the conditions that sustain it. Say it casually, repeatedly, emotionally, and it becomes a core belief. And beliefs, not desires, are what shape reality. Now here is where it becomes uncomfortable for many people, because the word we're talking about is something most have used thousands of times without a second thought. It's often said with resignation, sometimes with humor, sometimes with frustration, but always with consequence. It's the word that signals powerlessness to the subconscious, the word that tells your inner mind, this is my limit. And once that limit is accepted, life rearranges itself to honor it. Joseph Murphy warned repeatedly that you must never verbally imprison yourself. He said that every time you speak negatively about your finances, you are forging chains in your own consciousness. Not metaphorical chains, real psychological constraints that block opportunity, dull intuition, and narrow perception. Wealth, he taught, flows through awareness. When awareness contracts, so does income. Let's take a moment to understand why words are so powerful. Language is not just communication, it is identity formation. When you say something repeatedly, you are not merely describing circumstances, you are declaring who you are in relation to those circumstances. And the subconscious mind's primary function is to maintain consistency between your identity and your experience. If you identify as someone who is financially restricted, life will deliver evidence to support that identity. Not because you deserve it, but because your mind demands coherence. This is why affirmations fail for so many people. They say positive phrases in the morning, then spend the rest of the day contradicting them with careless language. The subconscious doesn't respond to occasional optimism. It responds to dominant patterns. It listens most closely to emotionally charged, frequently repeated words. And the word you must never say if you want to be rich is often spoken with emotion. Before revealing it, let's go deeper, because understanding why this word is dangerous matters more than simply avoiding it. Wealth is not just money. It is a state of mind that produces money as a natural effect. Rich people do not merely have different bank accounts. They have different internal conversations. Their language assumes possibility, it assumes movement, it assumes solutions. Even when facing challenges, their words do not collapse inward. Most people, however, speak from a mindset of defense. Their language is designed to protect them from disappointment rather than invite opportunity. And this protective language becomes a prison. Joseph Murphy explained that fear-based language activates fear-based outcomes. The subconscious interprets fear as a directive to avoid expansion, and money, by its nature, is expansion. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever said this word right before abandoning an idea, declining an opportunity, or talking yourself out of taking action? Have you ever used it as a justification for staying small, playing safe, or not trying at all? Most people have, and they don't realize they are issuing a command that says, "Stop here." The word is can't. I can't afford that. I can't make that much money. I can't get ahead. I can't take that risk. I can't see how that would work for me. Joseph Murphy was very clear about this. The moment you say, "I can't," you shut the door of the subconscious mind. You are not stating a fact. You are declaring a verdict. The subconscious hears can't as a final order. It stops searching. It stops generating ideas. It stops aligning you with possibilities. Because from its perspective, the matter is settled. This is why can't is so destructive. It doesn't describe a temporary condition. It defines an identity. It tells your subconscious, "This is who I am," someone for whom this is impossible. And the subconscious will then work tirelessly to prove you right. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind is like a fertile field. Whatever you plant grows. If you plant, "I can't," you grow limitation. If you plant, "I can," you grow pathways. The difference between those two words is the difference between stagnation and flow. Notice how wealthy individuals speak even when they don't yet have the solution. They don't say, "I can't." They say, "I'll figure it out." That single shift keeps the subconscious active. It keeps perception open. It invites assistance, ideas, timing, and connections. Saying "can't" shuts all of that down. Most people defend their use of the word by saying, "I'm just being realistic." But Joseph Murphy would say that realism without imagination is poverty consciousness. Reality is not fixed. It is responsive. The subconscious does not respond to logic. It responds to belief. And belief is reinforced by language. Every time you say, "I can't afford that," your subconscious hears, "Money does not flow to me." It doesn't matter if you say it jokingly or seriously. Emotion gives it power. Repetition gives it permanence. Over time, this phrase becomes a background program running silently in your mind, influencing every financial decision you make. Think about how this plays out in daily life. You see an opportunity, but before curiosity can arise, "I can't" shuts it down. You consider learning a new skill, but "I can't" blocks momentum. You think about investing in yourself, but "I can't afford it" keeps you in the same loop. This isn't wisdom. It's self-sabotage disguised as practicality. Joseph Murphy emphasized that the subconscious cannot distinguish between a real limitation and a verbal one. It treats both the same. If you say, "I can't," it assumes danger or impossibility and steers you away. That steering happens subtly through loss of motivation, missed timing, lack of clarity, and reduced confidence. Over time, life begins to feel smaller. Here is the truth most people never hear. Wealth requires mental permission before it appears physically. Saying "I can't" revokes that permission. It tells the subconscious that abundance is not welcome here, and the subconscious obeys. This does not mean ignoring bills or pretending reality doesn't exist. Joseph Murphy never taught denial. He taught redirection. Instead of saying, "I can't afford that," say, "That's not a priority right now." One statement closes the mind. The other keeps it open. One reinforces lack. The other preserves choice. Language shapes emotion, and emotion shapes belief. Belief shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. This is the chain Murphy understood deeply. Break it at the level of words, and the entire pattern changes. Now let's talk about why can't feels so natural to say. Most people were conditioned to use it early in life. Parents, teachers, and authority figures used it to enforce limits. You can't do that. Why can't afford that? Over time, the word became associated with safety. It protected people from disappointment. But safety and wealth operate on opposite frequencies. Wealth requires expansion, not contraction. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind thrives on expectancy. When expectancy collapses, results follow. Saying can't collapses expectancy instantly. It tells your mind there is nothing to anticipate. This is why changing your words can feel uncomfortable at first. You're removing a familiar defense mechanism. But discomfort is not danger. It is growth. When you eliminate can't from your financial language, something subtle begins to happen. Your mind starts looking for alternatives. Your perception sharpens. You become more alert to opportunity. Not because magic is happening, but because the subconscious is now permitted to search. Murphy often said, "Your good is on its way, but it can only arrive if the door is open." Can't locks the door. Now here's something critical to understand. You don't become rich by lying to yourself. You become rich by refusing to verbally define yourself as powerless. There is a massive difference. You don't say, "I'm rich," while panicking inside. You say, "There is a way for me," even if you don't see it yet. This is where faith comes in, and Murphy was precise about what faith is. Faith is not hoping. Faith is not wishing. Faith is inner acceptance. It is the quiet knowing that possibilities exist beyond current appearances. Can't is the language of disbelief, and disbelief blocks flow. Think of the subconscious as a navigator. Your words are the coordinates. Say can't, and the navigator stops. Say how, and it recalculates. Wealth follows those recalculations. If you've been wondering why motivation fades quickly, why plans stall, why ideas never materialize, examine your language. Not once a day, all day. The subconscious listens continuously. Here is a simple but profound shift Joseph Murphy recommended. Replace "I can't afford that" with "I'm choosing how to allocate my money." One positions you as a victim. The other positions you as a decision maker. Wealth flows to decision makers. Replace "I can't do that" with "I'm learning how." Replace "I can't make that kind of money" with "There is a way for me to earn more." These are not affirmations, they are permissions. And permission is what the subconscious requires. Once permission is granted, behavior changes naturally. You notice ideas you previously ignored. You meet people you previously overlooked. You take actions that previously felt uncomfortable, and money responds to action guided by belief. Joseph Murphy warned that poverty is often a habit of speech long before it is a lack of money. Break the habit, and you begin breaking the pattern. Now pause for a moment and reflect. How many times today have you used the word can't in relation to money, opportunity, or ability? Not out loud, internally. The subconscious hears internal speech just as clearly as spoken words. If you feel something clicking into place right now, it's because awareness itself begins to dissolve limitation. You cannot unknow what you now see. The moment you stop saying can't, you stop reinforcing the belief that you are stuck, and when that belief weakens, new results begin to emerge, often quietly at first, then unmistakably. Joseph Murphy taught that wealth is not chased, it is allowed, and can't is the word that disallows. From this moment forward, treat your words as instruments. Choose them with intention. Speak as someone who expects movement, not stagnation. Speak as someone whose future is open, not closed. You don't need to force confidence. You need to remove verbal defeat. That alone creates space for abundance to enter. Remember this every time you avoid saying can't. You give your subconscious a new instruction, and every new instruction begins reshaping your reality. If this understanding has shifted something inside you, hold on to it. Let it guide your speech. Let it guide your thoughts, because wealth begins the moment you stop telling your mind that it's impossible. Your future is listening. And this is where the real transformation begins. Because once you become aware of how destructive that single word is, you start noticing how deeply it has been woven into your identity. I can't is not just a phrase, it's a posture toward life. It's a mental stance that says, this is as far as I go. And Joseph Murphy made it very clear that the subconscious mind accepts limits only when you verbally install them. Life itself has no built-in ceiling. The ceiling is spoken into existence. Most people believe their financial limitations come from the outside world, the economy, their upbringing, their lack of opportunities. But Murphy taught that the greatest limitation is self-declared. The moment you say, I can't, you are no longer exploring reality, you are closing it. And the subconscious, loyal and obedient, immediately reorganizes your perception to match that closure. This is why two people can hear the same idea, see the same opportunity, live in the same environment, and experience completely different outcomes. One internally says, I can't. The other says, how could this work? And that single difference determines who moves forward and who stays exactly where they are. Think about how many dreams quietly died at the moment I can't was spoken. Not because they were impossible, but because the subconscious stopped cooperating, creativity shut down, courage retreated, energy drained away, and over time, the dream was labeled unrealistic, childish, or impractical. But in truth, it was never given a chance to breathe. Joseph Murphy emphasized that the subconscious mind is the seat of infinite intelligence. It is capable of generating ideas, solutions, and pathways far beyond what the conscious mind can imagine. But it will only do so if it is allowed. I can't is a command to shut down that intelligence. It is like turning off the lights and then complaining that you can't see. This is why wealthy individuals often appear calm even in uncertainty. They don't panic at obstacles because their language never defines the obstacle as final. They may acknowledge difficulty, but they never declare impossibility. They say things like, there's a solution here, or this will make sense soon. And that assumption keeps the subconscious engaged. Now here's something subtle but crucial. The subconscious mind does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you assume. And I can't is an assumption of failure before action even begins. Murphy taught that assumption hardens into fact. Not instantly, but inevitably. When you assume something is impossible, you stop preparing for it. You stop noticing signs. You stop aligning yourself with people, information, and circumstances that could support it. And then you look around and say, see, I was right. But you were only right because you made it so. This is why removing the word can't feels like removing a safety net. It forces you to remain open, and openness can feel uncomfortable if you've lived in contraction for a long time. But openness is exactly where wealth lives. Let's talk about money specifically. Money is fluid. It moves through ideas, services, value exchange, timing, and alignment. It does not respond to desperation, and it does not respond to self-declared limits. When you say, I can't afford that, you're not just stating a current condition. You're teaching your subconscious that money is scarce and that you are separate from it. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind must accept prosperity as natural before it can express it materially. Saying can't tells your subconscious that prosperity is unnatural for you. And the subconscious, seeking consistency, then produces behaviors that keep money at a distance. Notice how this plays out in subtle ways. You hesitate when you should act. You delay decisions. You choose short-term comfort over long-term growth. You undervalue your skills. You avoid conversations that could lead to opportunity. None of this feels dramatic. It feels normal, but it is all guided by a quiet belief reinforced by language. Now imagine what happens when that word disappears from your inner vocabulary. You don't suddenly become reckless or unrealistic. Instead, you become curious. You begin asking better questions. How could I increase my income? What skill could I develop? Who could I learn from? These questions activate the subconscious. They invite guidance. They invite ideas. Murphy often said that the subconscious loves clarity and direction. When you remove can't, you replace it with movement. Even if you don't know the next step, the mind begins to prepare for one. Here is something most people never realize. Your subconscious mind is always listening for cues about how big your life is allowed to be. I can't is a cue to stay small. Silence, curiosity, and possibility are cues to expand. This is why wealthy people often seem lucky. They are not lucky, they are permissive. They allow themselves to consider outcomes others dismiss instantly. And consideration is the first step of creation. Joseph Murphy taught that faith begins where fear ends, and fear often speaks through the word can't. It disguises itself as logic, but its true function is protection. Protection from disappointment, embarrassment, or failure. But protection also blocks reward. Now let's be very clear. Removing can't does not mean forcing yourself to say unrealistic things. It means replacing finality with flexibility. It means saying, not yet, instead of never. It means saying, I'm working toward that, instead of, that's impossible. Those small shifts may seem insignificant, but to the subconscious they are monumental. They change the direction of thought, and thought, sustained over time, becomes reality. Joseph Murphy explained that every word you speak is either an affirmation or a denial. There is no neutral language. You are either opening the door or closing it. I can't is a denial of possibility, and repeated denial produces lack as surely as repeated affirmation produces growth. Take a moment now and reflect honestly. Where has this word been quietly ruling your financial life? Where have you accepted limitation without questioning it? Awareness is the beginning of freedom. Once you stop using can't, you may notice resistance arise internally. Old beliefs will surface, doubt will whisper. This is normal. It means the old program is losing control. Stay with it. Do not argue with the doubt. Simply refuse to give it verbal authority. Joseph Murphy taught that what you refuse to energize with words eventually loses power. Starve limitation of language and it weakens. Over time, something remarkable happens. Your self-concept shifts. You no longer see yourself as someone blocked by circumstances. You see yourself as someone navigating them. And that shift alone changes the quality of your decisions. Money responds to self-concept. Opportunities respond to self-belief. Life responds to expectation. All of these are shaped by language. So from this moment forward, become disciplined with your words. Not rigid, not fearful, conscious. Catch yourself when I can't arises. Pause. Replace it with openness. You don't need the answer immediately. You only need to keep the door open. Joseph Murphy believed that wealth is a natural expression of a mind aligned with possibility, and possibility cannot coexist with can't. Your future will never exceed the limits you verbally enforce. But the moment you stop enforcing them, new horizons appear. Choose your words carefully. They are not harmless. They are creative. And the life you experience tomorrow is already listening to what you say today. And this awareness brings us to an even deeper layer of what Joseph Murphy was trying to teach, because the word can't doesn't just affect money. It affects how you relate to time, energy, and possibility itself. When you say, I can't, you collapse the future into the present moment. You deny growth. You deny evolution. You deny the natural law that everything is in motion and capable of change. Murphy understood that the subconscious mind lives in images and assumptions, not timelines. It does not understand temporarily unavailable. It only understands allowed or not allowed. So when you say, I can't, you are not saying, not right now. You are saying, not ever. And the subconscious responds accordingly. This is why people remain stuck for years, even when circumstances around them improve. New opportunities arise, better information becomes available. Technology changes, markets shift, yet they remain frozen. Why? Because their language has not evolved. Their words still describe an identity formed years ago, and the subconscious clings to that identity with remarkable loyalty. Joseph Murphy often emphasized that loyalty of the subconscious can work for you or against you. If you declare yourself limited, it will defend that limitation. If you declare yourself capable, it will defend that capability. The subconscious does not judge your declarations, it enforces them. Now consider how often can't is used to avoid responsibility, not responsibility in a negative sense, but responsibility for possibility. Saying, I can't, removes pressure to think differently, act differently, or risk differently. It gives you a sense of closure. and closure feels safe. But safety and abundance do not grow in the same soil. Murphy taught that prosperity requires mental elasticity, the ability to stretch beyond current beliefs. Kant removes elasticity, it hardens the mind, and a hardened mind cannot receive new forms of supply. Think about how children approach life. They rarely say, "can't," until they are taught to. They experiment, they imagine, they assume learning is possible. Over time, society teaches them limits. Not all limits are harmful, but verbal limits internalized as identity are devastating. This is why changing your language can feel like going against conditioning. Because it is. You are unlearning what was modeled for you. You are choosing expansion where contraction was normalized. Joseph Murphy explained that every word spoken with feeling becomes a decree. The more emotional weight behind the word, the deeper it embeds itself. This is why saying, "I can't afford that," while feeling stress or embarrassment is especially powerful. The emotion seals the instruction. Now imagine reversing that process. Imagine speaking from calm, from neutrality, from openness. The emotional charge dissolves. The subconscious receives a different message, and over time the old program loses its grip. Here is something most people never test, because they don't believe language alone can make such a difference. Try removing the word "can't" from your vocabulary for a single week. Not just out loud, but internally. Watch what happens to your thinking. Notice how often your mind wants to use it. That urge reveals how deeply ingrained the habit is. At first, you may feel mentally exposed. Without "can't," your mind will search for alternatives, and that search is the beginning of change. Murphy taught that the subconscious responds immediately to new directives. You may not see external results instantly, but internally, the shift happens the moment the instruction changes. Wealth always begins internally. Always. Long before money appears, there is a change in attitude, in expectation, in self-concept. Language is the fastest way to alter all three. Joseph Murphy believed that success is not something you pursue, but something you permit. And permission is granted through words. When you stop saying, "can't," you stop revoking permission. Now let's address a fear many people have at this point. They worry that removing "can't" will lead to reckless decisions or unrealistic expectations. But the opposite is true. Conscious language creates conscious action. You are not forcing outcomes, you are allowing intelligence to operate. Instead of saying, "I can't do that," you say, "What would need to change for that to be possible?" That question alone activates creativity. It activates planning, it activates intuition, and intuition is one of the greatest drivers of wealth. Murphy often spoke about divine intelligence working through the subconscious. He believed that when the mind is open, guidance appears, not as miracles falling from the sky, but as insights, timing, conversations, and impulses that lead you forward. "Can't" blocks that channel. This is why some people stumble into opportunities while others miss them entirely. The opportunity was not hidden. The mind was closed. Your financial life is not shaped by what is available. It is shaped by what you allow yourself to consider, and "can't" eliminates consideration before it begins. Over time, removing this word changes your emotional baseline. You become less defensive, less reactive, less resigned. You begin to approach money as something dynamic rather than fixed, and dynamic systems respond to engagement. Joseph Murphy taught that expectation is the magnet. What you expect tends to occur. "Can't" destroys expectation. It tells the mind there is nothing to anticipate. And when there is nothing to anticipate, motivation fades. This is why many people feel tired around money. Not physically tired, but mentally drained. They have trained their minds to expect nothing to change, and that expectation becomes exhausting. Now imagine replacing that exhaustion with quiet confidence. Not arrogance, not blind optimism, but the calm sense that life is responsive, that there are options, that nothing is final, that feeling alone changes posture, tone of voice, body language, all of which affect how others respond to you. Money flows through people, through exchange, through value, and people respond to confidence far more than desperation. "Can't" radiates desperation, openness radiates confidence. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind is always broadcasting. Others may not know why they trust you, why they listen to you, why they offer you opportunities, but they feel it. And that feeling is shaped by your inner dialogue. So as you move forward, treat this not as a trick, but as a discipline. Wealth is not created in dramatic moments alone. It is created in quiet consistency, in daily language, in small decisions, in subtle self-respect. Every time you catch yourself about to say, "I can't," and choose a different expression, you reclaim a small piece of power. And power compounds. This is how transformation actually happens. Not overnight, not through sudden windfalls, but through alignment, through removing internal resistance, through allowing yourself to expand mentally before expansion appears materially. Joseph Murphy's teachings were simple, but not easy, because they require responsibility. Responsibility for your words, responsibility for your assumptions, responsibility for the inner world that shapes the outer one. If you truly want to be rich, not just in money but in freedom, choice, and peace of mind, begin here, with language, with awareness, with the refusal to imprison yourself verbally. Stop saying the word that closes doors, and watch how life begins to open them. Your subconscious is listening, and it is ready to work for you the moment you stop telling it that you can't. And when those doors begin to open, they rarely do so in the dramatic, cinematic way people expect. Joseph Murphy warned that the mind conditioned by limitation often looks for miracles while ignoring opportunities. When you stop saying, "Can't," life doesn't suddenly hand you a bag of money. What it does is far more powerful and far more realistic. It changes how you move through the world. You begin noticing ideas that previously felt invisible. You feel nudges to act that you once ignored. Conversations suddenly take on new meaning. You hear something in passing that sparks an insight. None of this feels mystical in the moment. It feels ordinary. But ordinary moments are where wealth is built. The subconscious mind, once freed from the command of can't, starts connecting dots. It starts synthesizing information. It starts presenting options. And these options only appear to those who are mentally available to see them. This is why Murphy said that opportunity follows belief as surely as a shadow follows the body. Most people think wealth is about having more. Murphy understood it is about allowing more, allowing ideas, allowing growth, allowing movement. Can't blocks allowance at the root. There is a reason why people who escape financial hardship often say, "Something just shifted in me." That shift is rarely about money itself. It's about identity. It's about no longer seeing oneself as trapped, and that shift almost always begins with language. Think about how powerful it is to say, even quietly to yourself, "I am open to more." That sentence does not demand. It does not force, it invites. An invitation is the language the subconscious responds to most naturally. Joseph Murphy believed that the subconscious mind is not only powerful, but benevolent. It wants to support you, it wants to guide you, but it cannot violate your self-image. If you define yourself as someone who can't, it will honor that definition even when it hurts you. Remove that definition and support begins to flow. Now consider this carefully. Every time you say, "I can't afford that," you are not only limiting money, you are limiting value. You are telling yourself that your growth, comfort, education, or expansion is not worth prioritizing. Over time, this erodes self-worth, and money rarely stays with someone who undervalues themselves. Wealth is attracted to those who respect their own potential. That respect is expressed through language long before it is expressed through action. Joseph Murphy often said that poverty thinking is not about numbers, but about self-concept. You can earn more and still feel poor, or you can earn modestly and feel abundant. The difference is internal agreement, and can't represents disagreement with abundance. This is why eliminating that word is not just about money. It's about reclaiming authority over your inner world. When you stop using language that disempowers you, you begin to feel differently about yourself. That feeling then informs how you show up in every area of life. You speak differently. You stand differently. You decide differently. And those differences are felt by others. Opportunities come through people as much as they come through circumstances. People sense confidence, even quiet confidence. They also sense resignation. Can't broadcast resignation. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind communicates through feeling. When you say can't, it produces a feeling of contraction. That contraction influences your posture, tone, and energy. Others may not know why they hesitate around you, but they feel the signal. Remove the word, and the signal changes. This is why changing language can feel like changing identity. Because it is. You are no longer the person who announces defeat before engaging with life. You become the person who remains open, and openness is magnetic. Over time, you may look back and realize that the most important shift you made was not a job change, an investment, or a strategy. It was a decision to stop declaring limitation as fact. That decision quietly reshaped everything else. Joseph Murphy's teachings were never about forcing outcomes. They were about alignment. When the inner world aligns with possibility, the outer world responds naturally. Now ask yourself honestly, what would change in your life if you truly removed the word can't from your relationship with money? Not just superficially, but deeply. How would you think differently? How would you act differently? How would you see yourself? Those questions are not meant to overwhelm you. They are meant to awaken you. Because awareness is the first form of wealth. From this moment forward, let your language reflect openness rather than fear. Let it reflect curiosity rather than resignation. Let it reflect movement rather than stagnation. You do not need to know the entire path. You only need to stop telling yourself that there is none. Joseph Murphy believed that life responds instantly to changes in inner dialogue. Not always visibly, but energetically, and energy precedes form. So be gentle, but be disciplined. Catch the word when it arises. Replace it with something that keeps the door open. Over time, that practice becomes natural, and what once felt forced becomes effortless. This is how prosperity begins, not with money, but with permission. And the moment you stop saying, "I can't," you give life permission to surprise you. And those surprises often arrive in ways that challenge your old definitions of success. Joseph Murphy taught that when the subconscious is no longer restricted by limiting language, it begins to work through channels you never consciously planned. Opportunities may not look like what you expected. They may appear smaller, subtler, or even inconvenient at first. But each one carries momentum, and momentum is how wealth is built. Most people miss these moments because they are waiting for certainty. They want guarantees before they move. But guarantees belong to a mind that still says can't. An open mind moves with probability, not certainty. And probability favors those who act without self-imposed ceilings. When you remove can't, you also remove the need for perfection. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect confidence. You begin where you are. And beginning is the rarest act of all. Joseph Murphy explained that the subconscious mind responds to motion. When you move even slightly in the direction of growth, it amplifies that movement. But when you declare, "I can't," motion stops, and stagnation becomes the dominant pattern. This is why some people stay stuck even after learning everything there is to learn. Knowledge without permission produces nothing. Skill without belief produces nothing. Action without inner agreement collapses. And can't is the most efficient way to cancel all three at once. Now consider this carefully. The word can't is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides inside phrases like, "That's just not for me," or "People like me don't do that," or "I'm not the kind of person who." These are all variations of the same instruction. Different words, same command. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind listens for meaning, not grammar. It understands implication. If the implication is limitation, it responds accordingly. So the work is not just about avoiding one word. It's about recognizing the mindset behind it. A mindset that assumes separation from abundance. A mindset that sees wealth as something external, reserved for others. The moment that mindset loosens, life begins to respond differently. You may still face challenges. You may still experience setbacks. But internally, something fundamental changes. You stop interpreting obstacles as proof of inadequacy. You see them as information. And information is power. This shift alone can change your financial trajectory, because people who interpret challenges as information learn faster adapt quicker, and persist longer, those who interpret them as proof that they can't give up. Joseph Murphy often said that persistence is not about force. It is about belief that refuses to collapse, and belief is sustained through language. Now let's talk about something very important. Many people think they have removed can't from their language because they no longer say it out loud. But internally, the dialogue remains. The subconscious does not care whether the words are spoken aloud or silently. It responds to both. So pay attention to your internal commentary, especially when you feel discouraged, especially when something doesn't work immediately. That is when can't likes to reappear. That is when the old program tries to regain control. When that happens, do not fight it aggressively. Simply notice it. Awareness weakens automatic patterns. Replace the word gently. I'm learning, I'm adjusting, I'm open. These phrases keep the mind flexible. Joseph Murphy believed that flexibility is one of the greatest spiritual and financial virtues. A rigid mind breaks, a flexible mind adapts. Wealth belongs to those who adapt. Over time, you will notice that your emotional response to money changes. Less anxiety, less defensiveness, less urgency, more patience, more clarity. This emotional stability is not accidental. It is the result of no longer telling your mind that it is trapped. Money flows more easily to those who are calm around it, not indifferent, but calm. Calm minds make better decisions. Better decisions compound. This is why many people who suddenly come into money lose it quickly. Their language and self-concept never changed. Internally, they still say, can't. So the subconscious eventually restores familiar conditions. Joseph Murphy taught that lasting wealth requires inner congruence. The inner dialogue must match the outer result. Remove can't, and congruence becomes possible. Now imagine your life a year from now if you truly maintained this discipline. Not perfectly, but consistently. Imagine how differently you would speak about yourself, your abilities, your future. Imagine how those changes would influence your choices. This is not fantasy, this is cause and effect. Every time you avoid saying, can't, you plant a different seed. Some seeds take time, but they all grow according to their nature. Joseph Murphy believed deeply that no one is excluded from abundance except by their own beliefs. That belief may sound radical, but when you examine it closely, it is empowering, because beliefs can be changed. Language is one of the fastest ways to change them. You don't need to overhaul your entire life today. You don't need to force optimism. You only need to stop declaring defeat. From this moment on, let your words reflect the truth that life is responsive, not fixed. That growth is possible, even if the path is unclear. That you are not finished, because you are not. And the moment you stop saying, I can't, you begin living from a place where more is always possible. And living from that place where more is always possible is what quietly separates those who eventually become wealthy from those who remain stuck wondering why nothing ever changes. Joseph Murphy taught that prosperity is not an event, it is a process, and every process begins with a shift in inner agreement. When you stop saying, I can't, you are no longer arguing with life. You are no longer pushing against an invisible wall you built yourself. Instead, you begin cooperating with possibility, and cooperation is far more powerful than force. Most people believe success requires aggression, hustle, or constant struggle. Murphy understood that struggle is often a sign of inner resistance, and that resistance is almost always verbalized first. The words you choose either soften resistance or harden it. Can't hardens it instantly. This is why removing that word often brings a sense of relief, not excitement. Not euphoria. Relief. It feels like setting something down that you've been carrying for years without realizing how heavy it was. That relief is the nervous system responding to freedom, and freedom is essential for wealth. A tense mind cannot see opportunity clearly. A contracted mind cannot receive guidance. When you stop telling yourself that you can't, tension loosens, breathing deepens, thinking expands. And expansion is the natural environment of abundance. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind works best when it feels safe. Safe to explore, safe to imagine, safe to consider alternatives. Can't tells the subconscious that exploration is dangerous. That safety lies in staying exactly where you are. Remove that message, and the subconscious relaxes. A relaxed subconscious is creative. It generates ideas effortlessly. It notices patterns, it connects dots. Many people call this intuition or luck. Murphy called it the natural intelligence of the mind when it is not restricted by fear. This is why some people seem to just know what to do next. It's not magic, it's openness. They are not drowning out guidance with internal declarations of impossibility. Now consider how often people say, "I can't," not because something is truly impossible, but because they are tired. Tired of trying. Tired of hoping. Tired of being disappointed. The word becomes a shield. But shields also block nourishment. Joseph Murphy never dismissed fatigue. He acknowledged it. But he taught that fatigue does not require surrender. It requires rest and redirection, not resignation. Saying, "I can't," is resignation. Saying, "I need to pause and regroup," is wisdom. One closes the future, the other preserves it. This distinction matters more than most people realize, because life does not reward despair, but it responds to clarity, and clarity begins with honest, empowering language. You don't need to convince yourself that everything will work out. You only need to stop convincing yourself that it won't. That is the quiet power of removing can't. As time passes, you may notice something interesting. Situations that once triggered automatic can't responses no longer do. Instead, there is a brief pause, and in that pause, choice appears. Choice is the birthplace of freedom, and freedom is the soil in which wealth grows. Joseph Murphy believed that when you reclaim choice internally, external circumstances eventually follow. Not immediately, not magically, but reliably. This is how the subconscious works. It adjusts behavior first. Behavior creates new experiences. New experiences reinforce new beliefs, and the cycle continues upward. Now reflect on this truth. No wealthy life was built on the foundation of "I can't." Every wealthy life in some form was built on the willingness to consider what others dismissed. That willingness begins with language. From this moment forward, let your words be bridges, not walls. Let them invite solutions instead of forbidding them. Let them express faith in motion rather than fear of failure. You are not required to know how everything will unfold. You are only required to stop declaring that it won't. Joseph Murphy taught that life is always responding to the deepest assumptions you hold. And those assumptions are spoken daily, often unconsciously, so speak carefully, speak gently. Speak with awareness, because the word you remove today may be the door that opens tomorrow. And the life you want begins the moment you stop telling yourself that you can't. And when that door opens, you may not immediately recognize how significant the moment is. Joseph Murphy taught that the most powerful changes rarely announce themselves loudly. They begin quietly, as a subtle shift in how you see yourself and what you believe is available to you. You start to feel less boxed in by circumstances, less defined by past results, less intimidated by numbers, titles, or authority. Not because your situation has magically changed overnight, but because your relationship to it has, and that change alters everything. This is why Murphy emphasized inner work so strongly. He knew that once the mind accepts expansion as normal, external growth follows as a natural consequence. The subconscious begins aligning your actions with your new self-image automatically. You don't have to force discipline or motivation. You simply act differently because you see yourself differently. That is the true danger of the word can't. It locks you into an identity that life then mirrors back to you. Remove the word, and the mirror begins to change. Over time, you may notice that you speak with more confidence, even when you are uncertain. That confidence is not arrogance, it's trust. Trust that solutions exist. Trust that learning is possible. Trust that effort can compound rather than be wasted. Money responds to that trust. Opportunities respond to that trust. People respond to that trust. Joseph Murphy believed that faith is not emotional intensity. It is quiet certainty, and can't erodes certainty faster than almost any other word. This is why the simplest practices are often the most transformative. You don't need complicated rituals or endless affirmations. You need awareness. You need honesty. You need the discipline to stop verbally reinforcing what you no longer want. From now on, listen to yourself closely. especially in moments of stress, disappointment, or comparison. Those are the moments when old language tries to reclaim control. When that happens, pause, breathe, choose differently. You don't have to say something grand. You only have to avoid saying something limiting. Joseph Murphy taught that even silence is better than a declaration of defeat. Silence keeps the mind open. Silence allows the subconscious to continue working. Can't shuts it down. So if you find yourself unsure, say nothing. Let possibility breathe. As this practice becomes natural, you may realize that wealth was never as far away as it seemed. It was simply waiting for permission, waiting for you to stop telling yourself that it was impossible. That permission begins with language, with awareness, with the courage to remove a single word. And when you do, you may discover that life has been far more responsive than you were ever led to believe. Your future is not fixed, it is listening. Choose your words accordingly. And this is the moment where everything quietly comes together, because once you truly understand the power of that single word, you realize something even more profound. Wealth was never being withheld from you. It was being filtered by the language you use to describe yourself, your abilities, and your future. Joseph Murphy taught that life does not respond to what you desire, but to what you consistently affirm as true. When you say, "I can't," you are not making an observation, you are making a declaration, and declarations shape destiny. Most people spend their lives trying to change outcomes without ever changing the inner agreements that produce those outcomes. They look for new strategies, new systems, new opportunities, while unknowingly repeating the same internal command that nullifies all of it. The command that says, "This is where I stop." Once that command is removed, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to feel less heavy, not because everything is perfect, but because nothing feels final anymore. And finality is what suffocates growth. Joseph Murphy believed that the subconscious mind is always moving toward expression. It wants to manifest. It wants to expand. But it can only work with the materials you give it. Give it limitation, and it expresses limitation. Give it openness, and it expresses opportunity. This is why the smallest inner shifts can create the biggest external changes, because they alter the material the subconscious is working with. From this point forward, your task is simple, though not always easy. Pay attention to how you speak to yourself about money, success, and possibility, especially in moments when things feel tight, uncertain, or discouraging. Those are the moments that matter most. When the word "can't" arises, see it for what it is, not truth but habit, not reality but conditioning, and choose differently. You don't need to replace it with exaggerated confidence. You don't need to pretend. You only need to leave the door open, because the subconscious mind can do incredible things with an open door. Joseph Murphy's teachings were never about forcing life to comply. They were about aligning with the laws that already exist. And one of those laws is this: what you consistently affirm becomes your experience. So let your language affirm possibility. Let it affirm growth. Let it affirm movement. Not tomorrow. Not when circumstances improve now. Because the moment you stop saying, "I can't," you stop anchoring yourself to the past. You step into a future that is still forming. A future that responds to belief, to expectation, to openness. Wealth begins there. Not in the bank, but in the mind. Not in effort alone, but in permission. And permission begins with words. Choose them wisely. And as you stand in that awareness, something subtle but unmistakable settles in: responsibility. Not the heavy kind that feels like blame, but the empowering kind that restores control. Because once you see how much influence your words have had over your life, you also realize how much influence you still have. Joseph Murphy taught that this realization is the true turning point. Before it, people feel at the mercy of circumstances. After it, they understand they are participants, and participants move differently. They speak differently. They decide differently. This is why so few people ever truly change their financial trajectory. Not because they lack intelligence or effort, but because they never question the language that has been running their lives on autopilot. They keep saying the same things, expecting different results. And the subconscious, faithful to repetition, keeps delivering the same reality. But you are no longer unaware. From this moment on, every time you catch yourself about to say, "I can't," you will feel a pause, and in that pause, you will remember this truth. No word has authority over you unless you give it that authority. You can choose again. That choice may feel small, insignificant, almost trivial, but Joseph Murphy understood that life is built on small, repeated inner decisions. Over time, they accumulate, and what accumulates internally eventually appears externally. You may not see immediate proof. Do not let that discourage you. The subconscious works beneath the surface long before results become visible. Seeds are planted in darkness before they break through the soil. Trust the process, not blindly but patiently. As days turn into weeks, you may notice your relationship with money changing. Less fear, less tension, less self-judgment, more curiosity, more confidence, more willingness to engage. These are not coincidences. They are signals that your inner world is reorganizing. Joseph Murphy believed that when the inner world changes, the outer world must follow. It has no choice. The delay is not denial, it is incubation. So stay aware, stay disciplined, stay kind to yourself as old habits dissolve. You are not erasing years of conditioning overnight. You are replacing it gently, consistently, deliberately. And remember this above all: wealth is not something you force into existence. It is something you allow to express through you. The word "can't" was never protecting you. It was limiting you. Now that you see it clearly, you can release it. Let your language reflect who you are becoming, not who you were taught to be. Your future is still listening, and it will respond to the words you choose next. And that response, though quiet at first, is relentless in its precision. Joseph Murphy taught that life never misses a signal. It may delay, it may rearrange, it may take a path you did not predict, but it never ignores a genuine shift in inner agreement. This is why the moment you stop saying, "I can't," life does not rush to prove you right or wrong. It simply begins to adjust. Small changes appear, new thoughts surface, different impulses arise, and those impulses, acted upon, create new circumstances. Most people underestimate how powerful these early shifts are because they are subtle. They expect transformation to feel dramatic. But real change often feels quiet, almost ordinary. That is how you know it is real. It integrates instead of overwhelming. Joseph Murphy believed that when the subconscious mind accepts a new self-image, it begins expressing it through behavior without effort. You don't wake up one day and decide to be different. You simply notice that you are. And that is when wealth stops feeling distant. Not because you suddenly have everything you want, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. The internal resistance dissolves. The constant negotiation ends. You stop arguing with possibility. At that point, money becomes a tool instead of a source of fear. Decisions become clearer. Opportunities feel less intimidating. You stop shrinking yourself before life has a chance to respond. This is the quiet power of removing one word. Joseph Murphy taught that every time you change your inner dialogue, you change the direction of your life. And no word alters direction faster than the one that declares impossibility. So let this be the moment you choose differently. Not with pressure, not with force, but with awareness. You don't need to announce it to anyone. You don't need to prove anything. You simply need to listen to yourself and choose not to imprison yourself verbally. Because the moment you stop saying, "I can't," you begin saying yes to a future that is still unfolding. And that future is far more generous than you were ever taught to believe. And that generosity does not come from chance, luck, or external approval. It comes from alignment. Joseph Murphy taught that when the mind aligns with possibility, life aligns with supply. Not all at once, not without effort, but without resistance. This is the point where many people finally understand what they had been missing all along. It was never intelligence. It was never talent. It was never even opportunity. It was permission. Permission that had been quietly revoked every time the word "can't" was spoken. When you remove that word, you are not demanding wealth. You are allowing it. You are no longer standing in your own way. And that is often the biggest obstacle of all. Over time, you may realize that the most valuable thing you gained was not money itself, but trust. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in your capacity to learn. Trust in the intelligence within you that responds when you stop shutting it down. Joseph Murphy believed that the subconscious mind is always ready to cooperate. It is never withholding. It is never punishing. It is simply following instructions. Change the instruction, and the outcome must change. So let this understanding settle deeply. Let it guide your speech when you are tired. Let it guide your thoughts when you are uncertain. Let it guide your choices when fear tries to take over. You don't need to be fearless. You only need to stop declaring defeat. Because wealth does not begin when money arrives. It begins when resistance leaves. And resistance often leaves with a single word. From now on, let your language reflect openness, movement, and trust. Let it reflect who you are becoming, not who you were conditioned to be. Your subconscious is listening. Life is responding. And the future you want begins the moment you stop saying you can't. And when you reach this understanding, something settles into place that cannot be undone. You no longer see language as harmless. You no longer see words as empty sounds. You recognize them as signals that direct your mind, your actions, and ultimately your life. Joseph Murphy taught that mastery begins with awareness, not control, not force, awareness. Because once you see clearly, you cannot unknow what you know. You cannot return to unconscious habits without feeling the cost of them. From this moment forward, the word can't will stand out to you. You will hear it when others say it. You will notice it when it tries to rise within you. And instead of feeling guilty or frustrated, you will feel empowered because now you have a choice. You are no longer someone who speaks from limitation automatically. You are someone who chooses alignment deliberately. And alignment changes everything, not because it makes life easy, but because it makes life responsive. Problems become solvable. Obstacles become temporary. Challenges become information instead of verdicts, and money, which once felt heavy and distant, becomes something you can engage with calmly and intelligently. Joseph Murphy believed that this inner calm was one of the greatest signs of prosperity, because calm minds make wise decisions compound, and compounded decisions create wealth that lasts. So let this be the foundation you build on, not urgency, not pressure, not fear, but awareness. Each time you refuse to say, I can't, you affirm something far more powerful without even realizing it. You affirm that growth is possible. You affirm that solutions exist. You affirm that your life is still in motion, and life responds to that affirmation with precision. You may not know exactly how things will change. You don't need to. The subconscious handles the how when you stop blocking the what. Your role is simple now. Speak as someone who allows life to move. Think as someone who expects progress. Act as someone who trusts that effort can lead somewhere meaningful. Because the truth is this: the moment you stop telling yourself that you can't, you begin discovering just how much you can. And that discovery is the beginning of wealth in every sense of the word. And this is where the journey completes itself, not with noise or drama, but with clarity. Joseph Murphy taught that clarity is the true sign of inner change. When confusion fades, when inner conflict quiets, when you no longer argue with yourself about what is possible, you have crossed an invisible threshold. From here on, wealth is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you cooperate with, something you allow space for, something that responds naturally to the way you think, speak, and decide. You may still face challenges. You may still have moments of doubt. That is part of being human. But there is one thing that will no longer define you: the habit of declaring your own limitation. Because you now understand that every time you say, I can't, you are not protecting yourself, you are programming yourself. And every time you choose not to say it, you reclaim authority over your future. Joseph Murphy believed that no teaching is complete until it is lived. This understanding is not meant to impress you. It is meant to free you from unconscious habits, free you from inherited beliefs, free you from a language that kept you small without your consent. From this moment forward, let your words reflect expansion. Let them reflect trust. Let them reflect the quiet confidence that comes from knowing life is not finished with you. You do not need to announce this change. You do not need validation. You do not need permission from anyone else. The moment you stop saying, "I can't," you have already given yourself everything you need to begin. Your subconscious is listening. Your future is responding, and abundance is no longer blocked by a single word. Choose wisely, and let your life prove the rest.